In firefighting, there's this phrase that's used often, especially by the older chiefs. It's called the rule of thumb. See, when you're responding to an event, responding to whether it's a car accident or it's a train car on fire, or a dumpster fire, or any other kind of scene, as a firefighter, you know that responding to that scene means your life is in danger. I mean, that's why you're coming, because there's something going on that you're expected to solve, a problem that you have to solve. Well, as you arrive on the scene, there's a process. It's a mental process. It's a strategic process where you survey what's going on around the scene to determine where the hazards are, who might be in trouble, how you need to help, what your plan of attack is. And you have literally seconds most of the time to make that assessment. But there's one really strong rule of thumb that always applies to that size up. And that's what I want to talk about today. Welcome to Leading Leaders Podcast, 5-minute videos, 5 days a week. I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast. The rule of thumb for the firefighter, and it's usually the chief, or it's the captain in the truck, or it's the commander on scene who's doing the size up assessment as the trucks roll up. As the firefighters are beginning to deploy into the actual activity of fighting this fire or rescuing this scene, someone has to decide where is the safe zone, where are we supposed to be, how close can we be? And part of that rule of thumb is literally to hold your thumb up like the sights on a gun, and you would use your thumb to look at the scene. Now, this is a very old-fashioned and even grotesque kind of simplistic way of saying it, but the rule of thumb is if you can see the scene beyond your thumb, you're too close. And there's reason for that. And the reason is that once you get into the scene, there are a whole lot of different things that can create a problem. And if you don't take time at the distance to surmise all of the potential problems, then you can very quickly get into one. I was watching some fire video just the other day, and it was a grass fire burning along the edge of the railroad tracks. Now, that's a pretty common occurrence, believe it or not. Metal tracks with metal wheels, a spark, a rock, a flint rock from the actual rock bed of the train tracks, all of those things. If you've got a dry, grassy area and it's too close to the tracks, you're going to get grass fires. It happens. Someone throws out a cigarette from a passing car, you're going to get a grass fire. The problem is a grass fire out of control can eventually catch the creosote on the cross ties, and now you've got a much bigger fire. But you also have other obstacles like power lines and highline wires, and if you didn't know it, the poles that hold up those wires, sometimes with high voltage on them, they're soaked in creosote as well. Kills the bugs, burns like gasoline. So when you pull up on that scene and the first thing you think is grass fire, let's get water on it, it'll be all done. But you're not sizing up the fire from a distance to say what could go wrong if, then you're going to find yourself in a circumstance, a situation where the tactics may be right, but the strategy was wrong. The tactics might be right, but the strategy was wrong. The tactics of getting water on the fire, that makes good sense. Now, how do we apply that to leadership? See, the reality is in relationships, in business, in ministry, in politics, we all have various expectations of what the long-range plan is going to be. We have a mission. We know what our goal is when we go into that. Very few people go around building relationships, networking for business, networking for other purposes, and have no goal whatsoever other than to meet new people. Very few people do that. Some do. But most have something in mind, some mission, some fire scene, if you will, in mind. And their tactic of gaining alliances and building rapport and having new friends and building the network of people, that tactic is extremely important to that long-range mission. But they have an idea what that mission is. See, here's what happens sometimes, though, as leaders. We get so engrossed in the mission that we forget about the tactics. We get so engrossed in what our long-term goal is that we overlook the small details. I saw a video this morning that talked about the explosion in Beirut, Lebanon. Now, if you've seen the video clips of this is a devastating explosion. The explosion was caused by fertilizer, basically. And it detonated and it killed hundreds of people and it maimed thousands of people and it left over 250,000 people without homes. How did it happen? Let's see, there's the tactical answer to how it happened. I mean, ammonium nitrate, when contact with water, can cause a huge explosion. When contact with diesel fuel can cause a huge explosion. The water and ammonium nitrate is what we saw in West Texas, a small town outside of Waco. The diesel and ammonium nitrate is what we saw at the Murrow building in Oklahoma several years ago. But ammonium nitrate is a very volatile chemical. In this particular instance, the tactical expression of that was that it was contacted with water and possibly even fuel in a small fire inside a building in a port in Beirut, Lebanon. How did it happen? See, that's the story most people don't know. Apparently, and I don't have 100% of the facts on this, but apparently at some point, a Russian shipping company had moved it on its way to another port, and coming through the port for a port stop in Beirut, they had to pay a certain amount of fines to be in and out of the port, and they didn't have the money to pay the fines, so the local government confiscated the ship. That's a great tactic to make sure that you get your money. The mission was simply to make money. What was going on around it was without thought for the longevity of the problem. See, that ship sat there for 6 years, fully loaded with the cargo of ammonium nitrate. A devastating explosion was the result. The mission was simply to collect the tax. The mission was simply to collect the tax. But the mission wasn't sized up properly. And so over time, the tactics used to do that, bring their cargo into port. Well, what if it had been loaded with something else that didn't take 6 years as a ticking time bomb to go off? What if it was something else that was planned to cause a problem like that? Would the tactics be lost because the mission was just to collect taxes? See, leaders do it in business every day. We're so focused on the long-range goals. We're so focused on the annual profits. We're so focused on keeping the business in the black and not going in the red that we often forget that small investments need to be made in what seems like completely out-of-the-way tactics. We've got to pay attention to the fine details in a way that right now seems inconvenient. It might seem like an unnecessary expense. It might seem like a bad decision. It might seem like lost profit. Refunding a customer because you can't achieve 100% customer satisfaction. Well, what if they're wrong? What if the reason they're dissatisfied was actually nothing you could do anything about? Do you lose sight of the customer in order to maintain the profitability of the organization? Or do you allow the customer to be right even when the customer is wrong? Do you do what's necessary right now so that you can stay in business for your long-range mission, even if this tactic right now seems completely out of line with your overall strategy? See, I think leaders in relationships, parenting is a good example of times that we are so determined to get our way right here, right now. Perhaps we lose sight of the mission. Our mission as parents isn't to raise old children, it's to raise young adults. If we can raise young adults, we can change the shape of the world. If we raise old children, all we do is create more dependence. And if we lose sight of what the long-range mission is, then today's tactics aren't going to apply. Same thing is true with your employees. The same thing is true with the way you strategize your business. The same thing is true in the way you strategize the vision and mission plan for your own life. And so I challenge you as leaders. Size up the scene. Get a good idea what the long-range plan is, and then apply the tactics to it. But never allow yourself to be so focused on the long-range plan that you make missteps in the short range, that you find yourself in harm's way because you're already taking tactics based on what's way out there and not what's right in front of you. I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast for Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day. Right now, for our extensive video library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom.